all growth occurs outside of the comfort zone is one of my favorite quotes. They were all still within that threshold of safety, but they were pushing the upper limits of their comfort zones. It was really cool to witness their growth in real time. In the course of a little over 24 hours, I noticed big changes from each and every one of them. And that was really profound for me to have a direct experience of that growth and transformation. It was also validating for me knowing that I was doing a good job at fulfilling my role. I think that they have a lot of takeaways, and I feel like it planted a lot of seeds for them. And whether they sprout in a month or a decade, I feel like they are exactly where they need to be, and those seeds will germinate exactly when they need to.
Into the fire, here we go. Into the fire, head to toe. Into the fire, to be seen. Into the fire, to be.
Hello, this is Mark A. Lewis. This is the Sacred Village podcast. This weekend, we are in the middle of a boys' rite of passage. There are 8 to 10 men and 4 boys, so we're outnumbering them. They're young men, 13 to 15. They're coming in here because their moms told them to. I mean, that's not exactly true, but in a way, it is true. The boys that have been drawn to this rite of passage are drawn because they have mothers and potentially fathers as well. But so far, what I've witnessed, and I'm not the organizer, I'm just supporting the process. What I've witnessed is that the mothers have a vision of rites of passage being important for young men. And I certainly share that vision and appreciate that they also share that vision. It's in my opinion, a very important important aspect of life, whether you have a rite of passage through the adversity that you experience, just through life in general, whether it's being bullied or, the loss of a loved one, a car accident, these types of things, they can bring us into our inner world and force us to confront aspects of existence that we may have been ignoring or just, innocently have not been confronted with yet. And so we're left with a certain level of naivety, I suppose, or innocence, depending on how you look at it, depending on your age. And so the spectrum is quite wide in terms of that potential of awareness and, that ability to hold space for others, the ability to be mindful of our own process, our own emotions. We can have big emotions, human beings. And it's important as we get older to be able to hold space for ourselves, to be able to hold space for others. And so, we have these boys that are becoming men. We're leading them, the group of us, through a very well-organized rite of passage that will be taking place over the next 24 hours. The boys just arrived a couple of hours ago, and I'm going to do a few interviews over the course of this weekend. The first interview I'm going to be doing is with the man who's on the ground leading the rite of passage. So there is another man who is behind the scenes, who organized it. It was his vision. He's put it together. He's given us a roadmap to follow. And he's asked our mutual friend, Myles Ferryman, to be the king, is what is the title of the role. And the king comes from the archetypes of the king, lover, warrior, magician, which are often used in men's circles. And they're not, as we explain to the young men, these roles are not to distinguish any kind of hierarchy that exists, on a human level. When we're in circle, we're all equals. When we're outside of the rite of passage or the ceremony, we're all equals. But in these ceremonies, in these circles, we're asking certain men to take on certain roles, and that has a lot of value. It has value for the man who's taking on the role, for their own exploration of that aspect of self. It has value in terms of navigating the experience of being in circle, creating coherence. There's all sorts of medicine in understanding these roles and inhabiting these roles. And so that's a big part of this rite of passage. So this man here, Myles Ferryman, he's playing the role of king and leading the charge. And, I'm going to turn the microphone over to Myles. And Myles, if you can just, from your experience, what's that like, being a part of something like this and playing that role of king, and the experience that you have, leading up to this, being able to hold space for these young men?
Thanks, Mark. It's great to be here. Ever since I arrived yesterday afternoon to prepare the site, do the physical work yesterday to prepare the location and connect more with the men here, stayed here overnight, and then the boys arriving this morning. And I must say, starting from the first handshake, with the mothers dropping the boys off, and then also with the boys, that connection, that willingness to trust me and the other men to come to this weekend and to drop off their sons here for the weekend as well, felt very encouraging, and there's a responsibility, a healthy responsibility I'm willing to take on and share with all the other men here on the weekend. That's, my role as a king is about leading with wisdom and compassion and caring, having the bigger realm, the people in my realm in sight, and to care for them. And in order to care for everybody, I need the support of, the court, the other men organizing and being here on this weekend. So it's a group effort, it's a communal effort. And my understanding and my experience is, these rite of passages are a communal village endeavor and process. What I experience is we start something here. I mean, something starts within myself as well. I don't have children on my own, so this is a great opportunity to experience something new and some growth within myself, and also see and experience with the boys being here as well as they go through the weekend. One thing that it's really important to point out for me is, you mentioned it earlier, Mark, about emotions coming up and the value of those emotions, because my understanding and my own realization is that what makes me human, to have emotions. And they are energy in motion, and they come up, and for myself, sometimes unexpected, unregulated, surprisingly, and they come up and I welcome them. I find them very real. What I'm practicing and what I encourage and show these boys as well is to allow those emotions to come up, to realize them, and then over time, as they grow up and develop the capability to guide those emotions, those forces, to realize that they are in choice what they're going to do about or with those emotions, and how they deal with them. Again, this morning, Mark, you talked about emotions, that it's sometimes wise not to let them out or speak them or let them out physically or whatever, to be wise to contain them. Also being aware of the impact on others. When I let those emotions out, it can be quite hurtful to others, unfiltered and such. And to develop that awareness to guide those emotions in a healthy way, healthy for myself, to honor myself, be authentic still, but not releasing them when I know it's going to hurt the other person, or in a way it's going to hurt the other person. So nonviolent communication is a really important tool to use. Obviously, physical aggression is not an option. I mean, there's physical outlets for me, like, I split firewood, I go for a run, maybe I have a cold shower, whatever, I need to do, I can do about these emotions. And this boys rite of passage is a starting point to encourage them and allow them to get in touch with their emotions, and then be master of their emotions as well, to become and be a full human being.
Yeah, I think what you just shared really nails it. I think that's the most important part of this process and why we do it. Being able to manage and have a container, a loving container for ourselves. I know that you've had rites of passage for yourself as an adult, like the Mankind, for example, and you volunteered in Indigenous ceremony similar to myself. What are you learning as an adult? The value of these experiences.
Yeah, I mean, speaking to those two occasions you just mentioned, the Mankind Project, I participated in the New Warrior Training Adventure, which is a weekend of vulnerability. Getting really in touch with my wounds, my core wound, looking at it, um, discovering and honoring the shadow that comes from it, like the hurt and my imperfections, and not just shoving them away, and rather than holding them in front of me and be aware of them at all times. So when they come up, that I can handle them with grace. So that's part of that weekend. And what was very helpful and necessary and imperative is that what Mark just shared with this weekend, it's held with love and safety and trust. There's a whole group of men at the New Warrior Training Adventure who are experienced and caring, and it's a very safe spot environment to do that, to discover myself. It also creates a great sense of community. That's another awareness of this weekend. I hope the boys will get out of it, and myself as well, that they are not alone on their journey. There's a brotherhood, there's support, there's other men, there's their families to support them on their journey. So you're not alone on this, because a lone wolf is a dead wolf. So we are together in this. So a sense of community is very important. In my Indigenous experience, I've been the firekeeper at sundances for 4 years, and I'm telling you, surrender, and then more surrender, and then praying, and if it gets really hot in the sweat lodge, just pray harder. It's just it never ends, and it's the mind is very powerful in both directions, in all directions. So to be aware of my mind and how it wants to manipulate and make me do things, it was a learning experience and still is. So surrender, and trusting what my body and what my true self is actually capable to do is a process. And courage, brothers and sisters, courage. Courage is it's an adventure. Life is an adventure, and we're all going to die, but it's more important how we live.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, Myles. I appreciate all of your wisdom that you've accumulated over the years. You're very concise with your words and thoughts. Very much appreciated. That's guest number one, and we'll have guest number two before long. Okay, so we're back. I have Cory Smith with me. Now, Cory Smith is the visionary behind this rite of passage. He decided to take it on. He felt the call to take it on. He has a son who's in the rite of passage, who was of that age, and he wanted something for his son. And when he first came to me, I had done a rite of passage for my son about 6 years ago, and it went really well. But one thing that I picked up from the people that I spoke to at that time when I was doing my research was that when you're the father of a son, it's not helpful for you to be a part of the rite of passage. And I do feel like, that might be an edge for some people that are wanting to put this together. And Cory had to experience that edge because I think there was an assumption that he would be a part of it. But when I told him, that was the teaching that I received. And so I just remained on the sidelines and I let other men take over because for the, as far as I understand, the psychology, the psyche of the individual, the boy, for him to feel the father's presence will disrupt the experience of integrating into a circle and into, connection with the men of the village, and in our case, we live in a culture where we don't really have that village, but in a way we kind of do, because I think that Cory's son has met many of the men that are a part of this and does see that village forming primarily through men's circles and other ceremonies that are happening in our, and other gatherings that are happening in our in our town, Salmon Arm. So I'll introduce Cory. Cory, what inspired you? What else can you share about that initial inspiration and reason for pulling this together?
I attended a initiation to manhood in 2019 through the Mankind Project. So experiencing that really changed my life and helped me, evolve as a man. And along that path, the last few years, I've read several books, and a common theme that I continue to read and hear about is that there is no initiation for young boys into manhood within our Western society and culture, which isn't entirely true. There's organizations and there's these things around. But this summer alone, I saw an opportunity to send my son to one, and it was down in the Lower Mainland in Seashelt area, and they ended up having to postpone that one. So there are those, but they're not prevalent. They're not, in my backyard. So I know how difficult it can be to get my son somewhere or get my family somewhere. That's when it started. Let's build this here. Let's do this here. That would be, kind of what's been the driving force, if you will.
I have noticed that the impact of the Mankind Project, the Warrior Weekend, that it obviously had an impact. Can you go into that in more detail in terms of, what led you to that rite of passage, at that time before it happened? Not the details of the rite of passage, because I know those are kept hush-hush for good reason, because we don't want people to know what to expect when you go into these experiences. But, there was obviously a rebirth, something awoke within you, and that's like 6 years ago now. And it obviously made an impact. Can you just tell us a little bit more about what happened experientially?
Absolutely. My reasoning for going to that was due to a loss of eyesight. So in 2018, December of 2018, I experienced blurred and double vision. It just came on suddenly and quickly. I had a very high stress work environment. I was a father, a husband. I had a job where I had a lot of employees reporting to me, and just not managing that well, and seeing this physical manifestation of my eyesight being affected while I was awaiting an MRI scan. That was like, I went in to see the ophthalmologist, and within an hour I'm getting a CT scan and an MRI scan, and they're very concerned that there was something sinister, is what the radiologist said. So I'm sitting there in the waiting room for the MRI, and I just happened to start texting some friends of mine that were very important to me, and letting them know that, should they find what they assume might be causing this, I could be swift off to Vancouver. My wife's there with me. Just my kids are at home with a friend. So I'm really contemplating my life at that moment, and just life in general. And one of the friends that I reached out to was attending the upcoming New Warrior training adventure, and said, "Hey, I think you should come to this with me." So that was the call to adventure. And I received it, I answered it, and I went to the experience. And from that, so prior to that, my life was a lot about fantasy football, fantasy hockey, like these types of things. I would allow those to influence my behaviors, my attitudes. I remember my times where I would be on the couch in the living room watching a show. My wife would be in our bedroom, and there was just a lot of distance growing between us. I always wanted to be a good dad, but didn't really do the things that I now feel contribute to creating that experience for my kids. Went to the weekend, and one of the most profound things for me was just being able to say I'm not happy, and say that out loud, and coming to tears saying that, and coming home and telling my wife that I'm not happy, and it's not her, it's not anything. It's, this is a feeling that I have, and learning to just communicate that. And so since then, it's been a continual experience of growth and learning, and attending men's circles, and continuing to go to Mankind Project events, and to now curating and stewarding this boys' rite of passage. So it lit the fire. The fire was always lit inside me. There's an ember. However, it felt like gasoline being thrown on that, and it just ignited this passion in me for personal development, spiritual evolution, wanting to experience life for all I could experience for. Yeah. If anything, I don't know if that's a good enough sales pitch to attend that event, but I highly recommend it, or others like it, because it's the wake up, it's the shake up. It's things are the orange juice, the stuff settling at the bottom, and you got to shake it up before you drink it. Right. That's otherwise you just get a watered down version. So that's to me what these experience, what they do.
That's beautiful. It's very touching for you to be able to have that experience, like a near-death experience through a certain lens, and then have the, walk through that threshold, have the rite of passage immediately after the MRI experience, but to be able to go home to your family and say, I'm not happy, and it's not you, not to be projecting that onto your nuclear family. That almost seems rare. Almost seems like the obvious thing is that, well, it's my family that's got to go. I need to get unrooted and to go live in wherever, some exotic place. And, that's the only thing that's going to be the remedy. But with family in tow, let's create a different reality for ourselves together. That's really beautiful. Very powerful. And I can see why that threshold was created for you, that experience with the eyes, and in order to level up, to have a rite of passage. It's a very high level of challenge to be confronted with mortality like that in such a quick way. We're here, fast forward 6 years, and we're at a boys' rite of passage for your son. There's an archetype of boys when they hit puberty to be initiated. Villages or communities around the world are all having this idea, that's evolving through their, experience of life and maturation of men in relation to women. And what would you tell people, about the importance of this for young men?
Well, I feel honored to be given this idea and to see it through. I feel, as we shared this morning, Mark and myself and the other men gathered and circled up and had a check-in, and I shared with them just how grateful I am that I'm experiencing this. And there's only so many moments within my life that I've experienced a feeling of being just loved unconditionally, and this is one of them. So it brings me to tears, and that's how I know that it's a very impactful moment, because I can't withhold those tears. So this morning I felt that, and yeah, that's how I feel about being a part of this event with my son. And I will also comment, Mark mentioned earlier about the identifying that the father not being a part of it was a teaching that he learned. And when he taught me that lesson, I wanted to resist it. And my ego was like, no, I have to be a part of this. He needs to see me in this light. So he loves me, respects me, admires me. And that was a good lesson for me. And I'm, still working through all that stuff. But to be honest, it's like, yeah, that was really hard to let go of. Yeah. And then how do I see this impacting, the youth and the boys? And my understanding is that they're at this transitional stage from young boy moving into the adolescence, and it's a lot about risk taking. And our goal is to help them understand what a healthy risk taking is. So we've set up some events and things they're going to be doing that are going to challenge them, and they can be identified as risky. However, there's a lot of safety behind it. We're there to support them through it. A lot of us have done something similar, right? So that is life. So they're going to be approaching independence, and they're going to be having to step out into this risky world that we live in. And I want them to know that they have what it takes to take that step and to move into it, as well as knowing that there's other men out there. There's people that I can lean on. There's mentors. So yeah, there's a lot around it. But that's, to me, one of the biggest pieces is like, I'm not expecting them to leave this event and like clean their room every day. Like that's not, they're very responsible now, and they're disciplined. And no, I just want them to know that when the opportunity presents itself, and say someone's trying to push something on them that they don't want, and the risk is being isolated, that they might go, you know what, I can take the risk. I can step into that. I know there's others like me and I don't need to do this. And so many ways to experience risk, from physical to emotional, mental, spiritual. And we're trying to touch on each of them throughout the weekend. And that would be my biggest piece. That's what I hope they get from this, as well as the community and meeting these other boys and just really solidifying those relationships as well. So whether or not that it's achieved, I don't know. We'll find out in the end, but I'm excited.
I'm really glad that you brought that up. The risk, how much risk can we take as facilitators in order to create a bit of like a challenge that creates an experience of not knowing the outcome for these boys, where they're nervous about whether they can get through it. They have to have a certain amount of fear that comes up, and tentativeness, in approaching these thresholds. Otherwise, they won't have any value. To be able, like you said, to get through them, to see that they have the ability to get through them, and to see that, through adversity, they have the support of each other, with the other boys, the other, young men, as well as the more mature men, that it's a collective. They're entering a collective of manhood. One of the most poignant parts of the experience so far is just being able to sit in circle with these boys, with the other men, and identify that we're all equal. Like they've entered a different phase of life. They've entered a different type of community. It's a community of men, of masculinity, yes, but also, femininity within the male body, within the male archetype. And, we're supporting each other, being a man in the world. And now they're a part of that. So there's this point of inclusion, and whether that lands, I don't know, but I think the adversity part and the risk, without going too far, but going far enough, it's a balancing act, and trusting, the experience, what comes our way, and how do we navigate that. So, it's like there's a lot of trust that we have to have too as facilitators, and being able to tune in and listen. And, I think that there are men here that have been through a lot of these experiences, rites of passage. And so we're pretty darn attuned to what that edge should feel like, where it's still safe, but may not seem safe to the young man.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't know. Is there anything else that comes to mind here in closing about any of these topics, or just the rite of passage in general?
I would love to extend an invitation to all men out there to experience something like this, to gather with friends of theirs, to put on a rite of passage, quote unquote. That doesn't have to be a big orchestrated event where, like we've curated. I'm pretty proud of what we've put together. And like you said, Mark, it's many men coming together with having been through these types of experiences, that we're doing what we're doing. There's been a lot of commitment. I'm so proud of what we've accomplished. Meanwhile, take out a couple of your son and a couple of his friends. If it's a hunting trip, or you're just going to hit baseballs, there's opportunity to bestow your wisdom at these moments in life. Don't sit idly by and just watch these moments pass, because before you know it, they're independent and they're on their own, and you've either participated in their growth, or they've learned it from someone else and somewhere else. So yeah, that would be my biggest thing is I would love to see that these types of things just became more commonplace. And it was just, hey, you're turning 14 this year, you're going to a rite of passage. Hey, you're 21, you're going to your rite of passage. Just because it's at every stage of life, we can learn from the past and the future generations. So I think spending time with all these different generations and age groups is so important. And yeah, I'm just, and I'm such an advocate for it. And I think we need it so much, and it just gets lost in all that we have going on. So I don't sit there and judge anybody. I just go, how can we move forward from here on out? And if you hear this message and you feel inspired, send Mark a message and maybe something like this can come to you. I'm by no means holding everything tight. It's like, yeah, if we've created the framework, let's do this type of stuff. So yeah, I'd love to see it go on more, and just love to be a part of it. Yeah.
Thank you very much. That's Cory Smith. He put this the inaugural rite of passage. Yeah, I think it has a very solid framework for many reasons. The layers of integrity and foundation for this rite of passage are very, very solid. And if you come across this podcast, send us an email, which is on our website, sacredvillagepodcast.com. And just put rite of passage in the headline, and we'll answer any questions you may have. And I suspect we'll be doing it again next year, but we'll see what the demand looks like. We'll see what the response from the community and the need, but we certainly have the infrastructure and the vision to carry this forward. So much, due to Cory Smith. So thank you very much, Cory. Thanks for having a son and being inspired and doing your rite of passage.
Yeah.
All those things that led to this. Okay, that's it for now. We'll catch up with another man shortly. Well, here we are. We're Monday, following the weekend rite of passage. Everything went really well. The first two interviews were on the morning of the first day, Saturday, and then we went into that evening. There was sweat and a wild man fire that the boys were brought up to, and yeah, it was all very very well organized by our curator and the shepherd of the whole thing. It was really powerful to have Cory monitoring, kind of like the general in the tent, away from all the noise of the battle, and so we certainly weren't battling on the outside, but there were some inner battles happening, I suspect, for the boys and for the men. One of the things that takeaways for me was just how powerful the experience was for the men as well as the boys. I didn't anticipate it being manifesting that way to the degree that it ended up. And so I'm here with one of the men that helped, Brody Henry. He's the youngest man in the group, and was the ally is what our steward Cory referred to him as, which is somebody that was the ally to the boys, to the young men, someone that can relate to them on a deeper level than the rest of us. We're all, the others were, generally speaking, a little more grizzled and older. And Brody is, how old are you, Brody? 30? 29, not even 30 yet. So he was there to be able to, but Brody's been attending our men's circle and is definitely fully integrated member of the community of men here in the Salmon Arm area. And I also noticed too, during this rite of passage, that the intention here was to integrate the boys into a community that already existed. So it's as though, I was wondering about having a boys' rite of passage. I'd done one for my son about 6 years ago in Squamish. But also there was a community of men that already existed. And then moving here, it takes a bit of time. The men's circle started 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. And so there's this process of, when spirit says it's time, when the time is right to have a boys' rite of passage, it just so happens both the times, just 2 times. But, there's a bit of a pattern here from what I'm seeing, that there does need to be a solid foundation and community of men that is already, we've already been through passages together. We've already weeded out, certain individuals that aren't interested, that aren't aligned, with that commitment of having deeper rooted connections, shared values, conversations, challenging conversations. That's one of the biggest things, is how willing are you as a man or as a woman, when it comes to a women's community, and of course a broader community of men and women. But speaking specifically here about that community of men, how willing are you to have challenging conversations? And we've had a couple of different variations of men's circles here that have allowed us to compartmentalize intention around the willingness to go deep into the challenging conversations, into the challenging feelings. So there are men that have walked away from the men's circle that didn't have a very high ask in that regard. That was more about coming together, just being heard and not going as deep as some men would like. And then we formed another circle based on that need that was growing for the men that wanted to go a little bit deeper. But without further ado, we got 29-year-old Brody Henry, who was a huge part. He probably spent more time with the boys than anybody on the floor, the front lines, with these 4 boys. So I'm just going to pass the mic over to you, Brody, and just share, what comes to mind and heart here about this growing community and the rite of passage.
Well, thank you for having me, Mark. I appreciate being here. Yeah, the weekend, it was awesome. It was a great experience for these younger men to be more initiated into the path of stepping into a deeper level of masculinity and responsibility for them. And shout out to Cory for putting this whole thing together. It went great. There was all these different aspects of it, and I could feel there was some apprehension and some tension from the boys when they first showed up. I was the initial meet and greet, and I could feel a little bit of fear and uncertainty from them. They felt a little bit closed up, and I didn't quite know how to take it, but I knew to trust in the process. And as we got more involved and got them into the cabin and introduced ourselves, could feel them starting to soften up. And as the day went on, we did some shared activities, and we got out there and we did some firewood and collecting of wood and stacking and splitting. And I feel like that was a great way to kind of just break the ice and get everybody to work together. And in that collective teamwork environment, they were able to kind of soften a little bit and allow us to help them or give them space to let them figure it out. And in that threshold of, splitting wood as a teenager, there's some risk involved, but I feel like they did a great job. And whenever there's risk, I feel like there's also focus, and from focus, it drives flow. So I could tell that they were getting more into that flow state, which was really cool to see. And just playing the games, there was a lot of time for quality connection. And me being the youngest member of this experience, as far as the facilitators go, I have that connection with them. So I was able to kind of joke with them and, be relevant with the memes and stuff like that. So I was able to kind of crack them open, and it was really wholesome. So it was just really powerful. And like Mark had mentioned, the sweat was a great experience. There was definitely some fear involved for some of the boys, and I think that's healthy. It's a hot, small, dark, tight space. So if it wasn't the heat, it was the claustrophobia from it, and that had led to just some fear that came up. And I feel like there was a lot of times this weekend where they were face to face with something that was bringing on their fear response. And it was interesting to see how each one of them chose to step into that, whether they were able to push themselves or maybe they needed a little bit of encouragement, but they all stepped into it, which was really powerful to see.
Really appreciate you stepping into your role. Let's start with you as a individual. What would you say that your main takeaway, experientially was from the retreat?
I noticed myself wanting to give them advice that I wish that I had received when I was that age. And I needed to let go of my expectation on their outcome. I needed to trust the process and guide them, but also let them guide themselves. And Mark had brought that through as an intention for the men before we even started, to just give them space, be there to show them the way, but don't try to corral them too much. So I found that I was able to do a good job of that, and noticed different parts of myself in each one of them. So it was really healing for me to be able to go through that on the other side as the quote unquote grown up, the older man, the facilitator, and to be able to have fun with them, but also let them know that I am here as an authority. And in a subtle way, put that respect in place so they know that I'm not just one of their peers. I am there to assist them and to lead them and guide them. And I think another big takeaway I got was to really honor my own authenticity. We always say aho when we're sharing or when we're going through circle, different events. The men will say aho. And I've heard that so many times and I knew what it meant, but having Mark open that up and explain that it's authentic, honest, and open, it was such a great seed of contemplation for me to unpack over the weekend. And I thought a lot about authenticity and what that means to me and how I was observing that within the boys. And I think I was just more aware of how we show up and present through our masks, and how I've shown up and shined my light through this mask that I was wearing that wasn't truly authentic. Because I know when I'm being authentic. And sometimes I don't fully know when I'm not being authentic because I'm trying to be authentic. And so that came to me as if you're trying to be authentic, you're not being authentic. Mm-hmm. And I could see these little glimmers of authenticity shining through the boys with different times where they would let their guard down, where they would drop that mask. And that was really wholesome. And I enjoyed that. I took a lot of takeaways from the weekend, and all in all, it allowed me to step deeper into my own self-trust and knowing that I can take on challenges and step into these roles, which I've never done before, but have this deep level of faith and know that I am being guided, that I'm not alone in my journey.
Yeah, just going deeper into what we go into every time we do ceremony. Such a beautiful thing, that relationship with spirit. We're constantly, every single time, no matter who you are. It's just cultivating, just going deeper. It's a beautiful thing. Kind of connects us all to the same web that came up, the web of a spider. How we're all intertwined, interconnected, just like we're, all on the same web. That spider medicine is really powerful. And just on that note, I didn't have any intention of opening up the aho. I've never spoken about that. I've heard it spoken about and witnessed that, and I knew the acronym. But you asked me, so you're the one that brought it up. So you actually, it's like you touched that part of that web, and the vibrations were felt around, and then I spoke to it, and it went to every man in that circle, and we were sitting in circle because we sat in circle several times, and the power of circle, I can't emphasize that enough, was that was happening at that time. Probably the first circle that those boys have ever sat in, quite possibly. I can't say that for sure, but quite possibly. And then for that to become a primary theme. What does it mean to be authentic? What does it mean to be honest and open? And that became, the primary theme. We circled back to that at the end, tied it all together with that question of what each boy brings, to their life at this point in their life, because it does change over time. That was important. I felt also to emphasize, just for it to be in the here and now, not to be anything permanent, just what's speaking to you, what makes you unique, to allow that authenticity to rise to the surface in order to be honest and open as much as possible. Yeah. Just powerful teachings that were just kind of coming through, and we were all contributing to that, all a part of that, getting out of the way and just letting that all come in. It was really, really seamless. It felt like the whole weekend just went off without a hitch. Cory did an immense amount of preparation, not just for this weekend, but also for future weekends, I believe. And then just getting out of the way and letting the men show up and play their role. Yeah, I was really inspired. The whole thing. So, the last two men that I interviewed, it was near the beginning. And so now you have the bird's eye view, in a way, of the entire weekend, that perspective. What did you notice in terms of, what you witnessed for the boys in terms of a trajectory or, a growth, direction of growth over the course of the weekend? What could you say to that?
First thing that's coming to mind is that this whole weekend was a massive pattern interrupt. And I have noticed on my journey where those pattern interrupts had taken place and what came on the other side of that. So I really feel like they needed this because those Gen Zs, they're in a digital age. They're surrounded by technology, and you had touched on the power of media and how it is to be respected. And I think that having them step into a space of being unplugged and more connected with nature, and then also giving them the invitation to step into that contemplation of what is their uniqueness of how they show up right now. I think we gifted them the ability to step deeper into themselves and increase their level of awareness for how they're showing up. So I think it definitely altered their trajectory and threw some big stones into their own pond. And it's going to be interesting to see the ripple effects that come from that. But I feel that they really softened more into their own authenticity throughout the weekend and through, going out in the bush and knocking over dead trees or doing the tug of war, the games. There was this level of connection that they had throughout the weekend that they didn't have when they first got there. I think knowing that they are supported within their own micro community of the 4 boys that were there, knowing that they have each other's backs was really important for them to step into their courage, their authenticity, their own expression of how they wanted to show up. And all of them had talked about how they felt better after the sweat and being in nature.
Mm-hmm.
And all growth occurs outside of the comfort zone is one of my favorite quotes. And there's the comfort zone and there's a threshold of safety. And I feel like they were all still within that threshold of safety, but they were pushing the upper limits of their comfort zones and even stepping outside completely of their comfort zone. And it was really cool to see that taking place and to witness their growth in real time. Like in the course of a little over 24 hours, I noticed big changes from each and every one of them. And that was really profound for me, being able to have a direct experience of that growth and transformation. And then it was also validating for me, knowing that I was doing a good job at fulfilling my role. Not that I was seeking validation, but to have those results so tangible, it felt really good. And I think that they have a lot of takeaways, and I feel like it planted a lot of seeds for them. And whether they sprout in a month or a decade, I feel like they are exactly where they need to be, and those seeds will germinate exactly when they need to.
I appreciate you saying that because it takes that experience of trusting out of the ceremony and then allows it to exist in a broader way, be able to hold space for community, hold space for the people that are these young boys who are 13, 14. There's no pressure. It's just allowing it to germinate. We planted the seeds. That's our job. I can't stress enough just how important it was for there was such a powerful intention and such a good intention. And it just lined up so well that I did feel like the boys were indeed protected. So if there's any shadow that the men were carrying, the boys were protected from that. There was something that was in the air and just and happening and guiding everything along the way that allowed them to have this passage without it being contaminated in any way. It was like so beautiful. And a part of that was like the men coming into the sweat for the first round, not the boys. So cleaning the men off, and then the boys come in, and then the boys leave, and then the men are there for the hottest round, and cleaning them even more, cleaning that even more deeply, and just allowing that container to remain solid and clean and clear, but but only when it was needed. Only certain men were there for those cleanings, and certain men playing different roles. I don't know. It just all seemed to unravel exactly how it was meant to, with the boys at the heart of it, in a way that was protected and good and clean and clear, and it just speaks volumes. And then also the healing that would happen simultaneously with the men without that tainting the experience of the boys. It was so solid for everybody. So, just putting that tobacco down, singing those songs, that having that reverence, having somebody, that's done those rites of passage in different ways, whether it be Indigenous rites of passage or the mankind rite of passage, the warrior weekend. Collectively, there was so much experience already at the, coming to the table from the men, having and taken those courageous steps towards that. There was enough of that. There was a container that was solid, that we were prepared for it. So yeah. I just feel like I can speak rather honestly, my interpretation of just how and boldly, and how prepared we were, and how good of a job we did in terms of the human aspect, but more importantly, that willingness to trust in something bigger to come through when it needed to. And a lot of stress for different people admin-wise, but leading up to it, nothing at all during the ceremony, during the weekend. It was just all just happening and unfolding in such a beautiful way. It was very powerful. Any closing comments, remarks?
I really like how you touched on that the facilitating men, their shadow wasn't able to penetrate the energetic field of these boys.
Mhm.
And I felt confirmation when you said that, because every one of these men that showed up for that, I don't know their story, but I know that there's been pain and trauma, and that shadow is real. And through different levels of integration and healing, it was contained, and the heart, the purity was able to come through and to be there for the boys. I witnessed a lot of growth from the men who attended just as much as the boys, and I got a lot out of that. And that brought me a lot of joy and fulfillment to witness that. And as I was saying during one of the ceremonies we did, that we've lost a big part of the rite of passage for men to step into more of that mature masculine, that adult energy. And it's not like we were pushing that on the boys. We were inviting that space to open up for them. And it was really special to be a part of that, and to be doing something that felt so primal, in a sense, that felt like I was remembering as I was guiding, and also remembering as I've gone through different ceremonies and initiations and rites like that of my own journey and story. So I guess I would say that I'm excited for future events. I'm really grateful that this event took place, because it sent big ripples into that spider web of what's possible for this community, and for setting the example of men showing up for younger men and allowing them to step into the sacredness of that connection. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what comes of this. I'm looking forward to my own integration of this weekend, and seeing what insights and golden nuggets I get to extract from all these experiences that I had. So there's a lot of positive takeaways from this weekend, a lot of heartfelt emotion, and I just feel like the whole thing was very nourishing for me. It felt incredibly aligned, and it was just a great project to be a part of. It was really special.
Thank you, Brody. Yeah, I feel the same way. I was very impacted. It was a very heart-opening experience. There was a lot of camaraderie. I saw a depth of community happening before my eyes that I've never witnessed before. I think a part of that was that each man had a very specific role, and we were able to embody those roles and support each other, while the other men around us were embodying a different role. And together, collectively, it's like we'd created, they say that it takes a village. And within that village, it takes all kinds. We're all playing a different role in that village. It's not a monoculture. And so we're guided by the steward, the fellow Cory, who created the map. And he was informed, by the elders of this, men's work through the archetypes, the Joseph Campbell, Carl Jung, and Robert Bly, and the other elders of, of these movements. And he put that out there. He gave us roles, almost like we were characters in a movie. And there was concern that I had that it was too dramatized. I was appreciative of the archetypes, but I was a little bit apprehensive about the limitation or about the theatrical aspect of it. But when it came time to act, to go on stage, there was no stage. We just embody these roles, these different aspects of ourself, and you could have interchanged each one. I mean, he chose us for reasons that came from his intuition and his heart, and I don't feel like it was arbitrary. But at the same time, in a way, it was arbitrary because we each have that capacity within us. And I saw that within you. I'll mention there was a moment, we had spoken about this earlier, where you were the ally. So you were there supporting the young men. You were there alongside of them, helping them feel comfortable in each of the activities, each of the tests and rites of passage. You sat with them at the back of the lodge where the men were all around them. There were three men basically on either side, and then the boys were in the back. There were 4 boys, but Brody was in the middle, in between the 4 boys. So then there was like a crown, it kind of felt like, at the back, which was really kind of cool because Brody's taller than the boys and much bigger. And so it was really poetic visually for me. But then later that night, though, there was a gathering, and I had the drum. I was kind of ostensibly leading the gathering, but there was a certain point after I'd finished my song and after I'd finished this part of the initiation, it was so obvious that Brody was meant to close it, pass the drum to him. Okay, man, close it up. And he looked at me, and there was just a second of like, this isn't in the script. but at the same second, the same moment, I feel like there was an awareness that this was happening, and it was meant to happen because you took that drum and then you started to share. You closed it with basically like a speech that was just so dialed, and the fact that the ally was sharing the speech and stepping into that king role. Even though another fellow, Myles, was ostensibly, he was given the king role, but you stepped into that energy for a period of time. And so we got to see that shapeshifter happen, that, seeing that each one of us embodies those different archetypes. And, the men's work is all about that wholeness and understanding that we're all things, and understanding where we, in this lifetime, at this time, because it changes over time, but at this time, we're going to embody certain roles, in a more significant way energetically than other roles, just like in partnership, whether it's masculine or feminine energy, nurturing or warrior or lover or king energy, queen energy, however we want to label these different archetypes in order to give us some cohesion and some direction. These archetypes help, but these archetypes also honor existence. They honor the spirit realm, those energies that come from the spirit realm that help us embody these ways of being, these energies that are invisible. They're impossible to really put our finger on and package. We can only just sort of, Cory creates a script, and then it feels like it might be theatrical through the mind, and then you get in there and you start inhabiting it, and it takes on a whole spiritual aspect. It's like we're now in flow. Now we're in spirit's hands. And that's why those boys were protected, because we gave ourselves over to this container, and there was prayer around that. There was intention around that protection, and we got what we asked for. It's like getting what you asked for at Christmas. Yeah, what a beautiful path, and to go deeper into friendships and deeper into self all at the same time, and then go back to your house, your home with your partners, and have your integration, have your cry, have your argument if that's what you need in order to kind of move that energy, and then coming back to that place of like humility and love and reverence and connection. Yeah. End of story. For now. Okay. Well, yeah, that wraps it up. Thank you, everybody, listeners out there. I hope you feel inspired. I believe it's a very powerful phenomenon, a powerful exercise, a rite of passage for boys, 13, 14 years old. feel into it. That's my opinion. The 14-year-olds may have gotten a little bit more out of it, but it really depends on the individual. It's kind of like, let that puberty thing happen, let it settle for just a short period of time. And then it's kind of like, okay, that period's over. Now we bring them into initiation. Not in the middle of it, not in like that awkward stage, 12, 13, but after it's settled. And then it's sort of like, okay, their psyche is like, now what? Okay, I'll show you. You're going to come and you're going to hang out with the men for a weekend, men that have also been initiated, that are a part of a community, that are willing to have those difficult conversations, that are willing to have big cries in front of other men if necessary, that there's a certain level of willingness. And not every man has to be at the same place on that path when they come here. But you certainly want a certain amount of maturity. Bring in the elders, bring in the people. If you're organizing something like this, bring in those men that you've noticed are carrying something, carrying a little bit of that magic and willingness. Call it magic. I don't want to hyperbolize, that one man have something more than another man's. I think that word willingness is really more apt, more appropriate. And then, because the magic it's not really up to us. That's what happens when we get out of the way. There we go. Sacred Village podcast, Boys Rite of Passage episode. Mark A. Lewis, interviewing Myles Ferryman, Cory Smith, Brody Henry of the Boys Rite of Passage and Salmon Arm. If you want to hear more, we're going to be putting together a document that will help other stewards out there organize something similar. Send us an email. Over and out. Check out my lovely partner's music, Kristina Jessen, at KristinaJessen.com. And there's also more information on what we're doing. We're doing a land project up here, traditional land development with a community intention. And if you're interested in any of the retreats that we're a part of and part of organizing, you can find all that information at sacredvillagepodcast.com. Have a wonderful day.